Today we're doing a slideshow, a travel log, you might say. A couple of months ago I was here to report back on my trip to Israel that happened back in May. And something happened along the way. We didn't get our technology to work, but this week we figured out, we figured out how to do it. So we got everything on a shared drive, and it's going to work this time. And what I'm talking about is a trip that I took to Israel in May. 1st of May is when I landed in Israel, and I was there for 2.5 weeks. I spent 4 or 5 days before getting there. The rest of the tour that was coming out of the Seattle area didn't arrive till Monday, I think the 5th of May, but I arrived actually on the 1st of May. So I was there for 5 days on my own, trying to figure out how to get around, how to exchange money, what bus to get on and train and all of that. So that was a real adventure. I'll talk a bit more about that because something rather dramatic happened while we were there. Not to me personally, but happened in Tel Aviv. This is from when you go to Israel on a tour, they always take people to the same place to take this parting picture, and they give you this. So this is a copy of this. And inside we have the official picture of us when we were there on one of the last days. So I spent 7.5 days, 2.5 weeks on this trip. Now it all began, go to the next slide, Michael, next slide. When you go, they give you all kinds of certificates. I have a pilgrim certificate. Next slide. And I have, this is the Yosher Tours, was the organizer, the group that took us there. And they have the people on the ground to guide us. And if you've never, how many people have been to Israel before? How many have been on an official tour where you had a professional tour guide? Those guys are really good, guys and girls. They are amazingly experienced and qualified to do this. And everybody thinks their guide is the best in the business. Everybody comes back, and that's good. There was no bad apples in that whole bunch. Next slide. And this is to verify that I was in a sifting project, sifting artifacts from Jerusalem and revealing its glorious past. We'll talk a bit more about that. Your servants have cherished her stones and favored her dust. Interesting. What does that mean? For your servants have cherished her stones and favored her dust. One thing about Israel is there's a lot of dust. There's rocks. In East Texas, we have the sticks, the trees. But in Israel, you have rocks and sand and rocks and dust. And that dust has been, those trails have been beat up so much with people walking for thousands of years. They're just like a fine powder that gets everywhere. No wonder when you visited somebody's house in those days, Bible days, they had somebody to wash your feet because your feet always got nasty walking around with dust on those roads. What's interesting is some of these sidewalks or roads that we walked on there in Israel, you can still walk on them 2,000 years later. And yet every 4 or 5, 3 years, we have to repave our highways. And they've been there 2,000 years, and they haven't worn out yet. It's pretty rough. You wouldn't want to try it on your high heels, but they're still there. This was at the City of David project, which we'll get to a little bit later. So next. And next. This is when you transition to the other part, to the very beginning. We'll come back to this one a little bit later. This whole started 53 years ago. 53 years ago. I was in Israel for the whole summer on the archaeological project we called the Big Dig in Jerusalem at the Temple Mount platform along the western wall and the southern wall as well. And we took this picture. I say we. It was a project I did for this particular print. I did it for a photojournalism project when I was at Ambassador College under the tutelage of John Robinson. I worked for Dave Robinson, as did some of the other people here from transportation. And John Robinson was the journalism teacher, and he taught photojournalism. And I would say to this very day, this is probably one of the best classes that I got in Ambassador College. It was amazing what I learned, and I'm still using those skills today as a photojournalist. This is a picture that I staged in a bombed-out building, probably from the '67 war, because Israel did not have access to all of Jerusalem until the Six-Day War in 1967. And Mike, a guy from Pasadena, was my human tripod. I had my Honeywell Pentax, and I said, you stand right here and push the button when I say push the button. So I take credit for it because I staged it, and it was my camera and my film, but he actually pulled the trigger. And what's interesting about this show, this particular example, I don't know if I realized it at the time, but notice the Dome of the Rock in the background to the left through that arch. That's the third most holy site in Islam, and it's burnished gold, not real gold, burnished aluminum, I think, or zinc or something like that. And this is the big controversy in Israel right now because a lot of the, I say a lot, many of the religious, especially the Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox religious Jews and rabbis want to build a temple. They've got the plans ready. They've got all of the gold emblems and the candelabras. They are ready to go with a project to build a temple. They just need a place to put it without starting another world war. Well, that's where they want to build it. I say that may not even be the exact place anyway. You could put it over to the north. As a matter of fact, I'll show you some slides later. That is very likely the original temple that Solomon built might have been about another 50 yards north of that, because the gates, the eastern gate, the gate beautiful, the Golden Gate, that lines up, not here, it lines up just north of this mosque. But it would probably look pretty weird to have that beautiful new building next to this beautiful building, but it would be incongruous. But if you look at the plans at the Temple Institute, if you've ever gone on, just go to the Temple Institute. I visited it on one of the last days I was there in Israel, went in there for a while, just a short trip, is what they're envisioning is a massive structure, several stories, and modern and old, and they're going to have to build it without using steel or iron, which is going to make it very interesting. How do you do that? But they have the plans for it. Either they build it there, or maybe if some people think that Gihon Springs was the location of the original temple. I know, what was his name? Ernest Martin, who used to be one of our instructors in Pasadena, was one of the chief proponents of this idea. But that's debate, and we're never going to figure that out probably in our lifetime. But anyway, what's in this picture is images of three of the most holy sites in the Abrahamic religion traditions. The Dome of the Rock for the Islams, down on the bottom right behind my leg. You'll recognize that little sliver. That's the wall, the Western Wall, the Kotel. They used to call it the Wailing Wall because the Jews wailed there so much, mainly before they could get there. And when Israel took over this area, that was only an alley back there. It wasn't a large plaza like it is today. They bulldozed the buildings out of the way in the first few days to create this big open platform so people could come out there and do it. So I think this building was damaged in that war because of all this rubble, rocks and things. And this window looks like it was blown out. Who knows, maybe a bazooka hit or something. So you've got the Western Wall, the Kotel, which is what they call it in Hebrew, Dome of the Rock, and in the far background to the right, barely you can see it, is the Mount of Olives. And we all know the Mount of Olives is the place that Jesus said he would return to at the end of days. And set foot on the Mount of Olives. Michael, did I hit the wrong button? I don't think this is connected, so anyway, that was what's significant about that picture. I think that's probably my favorite picture that I ever took because of its historical significance. And it took me 10 prints, 8 by 10 full-page glossies to make this work, to get the balance of the colors just right. If you've taken photojournalism, you know what we're talking about, dodging and burning. This is not a lecture about photography, but it's interesting. Okay, turn the page. Next, please. This is me 53 years ago. I was an excavator. We weren't the brain power, we were the muscle power. So we dug dirt and we threw them in these rubber buckets and would haul them up by pulleys, dump them in a wheelbarrow, and then either sift them. If we found an area that was interesting in terms of refining metals or glass or something interesting, then we'd slow down and we would take a bucket and then we'd put it on a hardware, what do they call it, hardware cloth, with 1/4-inch holes, and shake it back. Two guys shake it back and forwards. And then hopefully the good stuff would stay on top. But we lost a lot of stuff. They think that now that modern archaeology has evolved, that as much as 80% of the things we threw away that ended up in a dump somewhere, I hope they actually kept track of that in case they want to go back, because you could go back there and re-sift that stuff and find all kinds of things. And that is very likely. What we did is we did dry sifting, and today, that certificate I got, now they do wet sifting. They take it to a special place, it's under a shade, and we have modern water hoses and spray, and we spray it. And just within seconds, boom, you see all of this stuff. Mosaics, glass, bones. I found a coin one day. We only did this for 1 hour just to get that experience. So it was a totally different experience, but it was kind of great getting back into the game again and doing some sifting that I had done previously, and see how they've changed the technology over the years. And that's at the Temple Mount. What they've done is they discovered, you may have heard about this in the news 10 or 15 years ago, they discovered the Pilgrim Road that goes from down the City of David area, down towards Pool of Siloam, comes right up the ridge of Mount Moriah, and goes right up to the western wall temple. This is, I think, the southern wall, but it went right along where we were digging. Where I was digging was a 5 by 5 meter plot at the very, literally against the western wall, only about maybe 60 yards from where the Kotel is, where the Jews consider their most holy site. So we were that close, and we dug down about 25 feet to the pavement of the time of Jesus. That's what we got down to. And we didn't exactly know what we had at the time. They didn't explain a lot to us, the archaeologists, about the significance of what we did. But when you look back over 50 years, now they have a whole museum called the Davidson Archaeological Park. And then now you can see what it looked like. And you could see these giant boulders this big that were thrown over the temple wall, the Temple Mount walls, and crashed on the sidewalk or the road, the Pilgrim Road. And we just left them. I say we. They just left them there as evidence. This was the destruction in 70 A.D. when the Romans came and trashed the place. And evidently they kept throwing things over until finally there was no place to throw it, because the dirt pile was now as high as they were, and that's when they stopped destroying the Temple Mount. So this whole area was higher back in the day. I mean, even the platform you walk out today, that's not the original level. It was actually, it's higher than that. So they rebuilt it. There was also about turn the page, next please, about 2 million 2 million gallons of water they could hold with the cisterns underneath the Temple Mount platform. In Israel, you have to make hay when the sun shines, or the opposite of that. You've got to catch water when it falls. So they catch it with cistern, and they're all over archaeological sites. They would catch that cistern water, and that's what they would rely on, because they only get rain about 2 months out of the year on a normal year. This time in April, they got a real big rainfall, which we'll talk about maybe later, that it was right before I got there, about a week before I got there were these forest fires raging in Israel. And if you've been to Israel, you wonder, what forest? What forest is there to burn? 40, 50 years ago, there wasn't any forests, really. They had begun to plant some of the trees, like pine trees and things, in the late 1800s. When they arrived, the Jews began to arrive in Israel, there were only about 30,000 trees in the whole country. Now there's over 200 million. Israelis have been planting these things for over 100 years. And now they have pine forest. Well, pine forest makes a really nice hot heat. They had a windstorm, and that caught fire. A lot of fires were going right to the west of Jerusalem. And then all of a sudden, and almost like a miracle, it kicked up a lot of wind, a lot of dust went into the air, and then the rain came down. And I'll show you an example of what it did in Tel Aviv. But in En Gedi, on the Dead Sea area, north of the Dead Sea, there was a gully washer. I mean, it was like what happened in Guadalupe a few months ago in Texas. It was a raging storm. And even though it wasn't raining there, it was raining upstream in the high country. Judea, where Jerusalem is about 2,500 feet high. Dead Sea is 1,400 feet below sea level. So you have about a 4,000-foot elevation gain between the two. So when the Bible talks about going up to Jerusalem, that wasn't meaning they were going from south to north necessarily. I mean, they were climbing the mountain. It's the hill country for a reason. This is a picture that I took back in the day in 1972 AD. And this is the southern wall. Next slide. And this is another picture of that general area back in the day. Now it looks a lot better. I think the Dunn Gate is over to this area. We drove in back when we were there. Dave and I were in college together, and we were on the same excavation trip. And we were on the same hole for about a week. But we can't talk about that one if we're being recorded. But now it's all been cleaned up and looks a lot better. It's called the Davidson Archaeological Park. Next slide. So this is where it all started. And then I decided, I've been wanting to go back for years, and finally opportunity arose, and I went with this group that I knew out of Seattle called, mainly from the El Shaddai Ministries group. This is the entrance into Tel Aviv. And first thing you see is welcome to Tel Aviv. So that's in Hebrew. Next slide. And, passports. You've got to have passports for everything around there. You've got to have passports to go into a restaurant. Just kidding on that part. But it's, when I checked out, the day I checked out, I think I had to show my passport 10 times to get out of the country. It's easier to get into the country than to get out of the country. Next. And then they lost my baggage. I think I talked about that last time I was here, and it doesn't do any good to call that number. Next slide, please. So I went 4 days without my primary luggage. And they only deliver once a day, and they missed this, and then there was the Shabbat, and nobody works on Shabbat. So I finally got it Sunday afternoon, and I was leaving the next day on the tour. So thankfully it showed up in time. Well, what happened up in Jerusalem, they had this big rainstorm. Well, it rained mud in Tel Aviv. This is from the rain. So much dust was in the air. You could still see it the day I got there. I never remember seeing the dirt so bad here. Is it that bad of pollution? Well, it was still this windstorm from the desert blew up so much dust. Every car was covered with so much of this, you couldn't even drive until you washed the windows. And I asked people, what is this? And then nobody seemed to really know. Finally, somebody fessed up to it. Next. This is a typical street in Tel Aviv, which is a semi-modern city. Next. There's a lot of juxtapositions of old and new. Next slide. This is a market this is a bazaar, basically. They call it a shub. Shoot. Rosalie, she spent about 2 or 3 months in Israel as well. And next one. And this thing goes for, probably about 500 yards. Just booth after booth. And I got a hat there and some other trinkets. A park. Next slide. Some of the themes of this you're going to see. You're going to see, of course, some seascapes. You're going to see flowers. We're going to see doors and windows, which I found interesting. This is the coast of Tel Aviv, and looking towards that point out there is Jaffa, or Yaffo, which was the old port. Very important back in the day. Next slide. So I walked up there to that area. You can see what a modern city it is, all these high-rises. Don't look too close because a lot of things don't look all that good. Next slide. A lot of people left the country since the war started, so there's a lot of vacancies, and the country is still hurting. Obviously, the war's not over yet, because so many people left and so many people are in uniform right now rather than working on their jobs. So it's taken a real toll on them, and economically, they don't have the tourist business that they had once upon a time. Next. The beach, next. Everybody has to go to the beach. That's the hat I bought over there. This little cat. So I saw a lot of cats over there. They have plenty of cats. Next. Next, just showing you some of the architecture that has been collected over millennia from different cultures. Quite a bit of variety. Next, and this is again looking from Jaffa towards Tel Aviv. Keep going. Keep going, and keep going. Here we go. This is a little park, and the next slide has some interesting abstract. This is looking from this little park heading again towards Jerusalem. If you've ever watched I-24 News, anybody ever watch I-24 Israel News? You will see their opening scene is pretty much this, except taken a little bit further to the left, and you can see this beautiful beach along the shore of Jaffa and downtown Tel Aviv. Next slide. Next. This is what I want to show you. It is an abstract piece of art representing faith journeys. Next one. We'll explain it in a bit more detail. Now, you have to have a little bit of creativity or imagination to figure this out. But up here on the top represents the fall of Jericho, the walls of Jericho. And over here is Jacob's dream. Remember the ladder? Now, again, you need a little creativity to figure this out. Think like an artist. And over here, the binding of Isaac, the Akedah in Hebrew. And next slide, you might make it a bit more obvious. This tells you what it is. Statue of faith. So Jacob's dream, sacrifice of Isaac, which almost took place, fall of Jericho. So you can see. But the orders, I think, I took it from the other side, so that's what they mean. Next slide. Okay, I guess that's all of that one. More pictures of Jaffa. Keep going. A lot of mosaics. You'll find many mosaics in the land of Israel. When you see mosaics on the floor, you know you're excavating a wealthy person's home or palace or business. Poor people, lucky to have any kind of rock, not mosaics. These mosaics are about not even an inch wide typically. And when we were doing that wet sifting on the temple, on the Mount of Olives, we found every single scoop had some of these mosaics in it. I was amazed how much there was. Again, this was a dense area. It was along the road that went from lower Zion right up to the temple, so there was a lot of stuff there. Next slide. This is, keep going, the Wishing Bridge just across the area. Nothing particularly interesting about that. Next slide. These are zodiac signs, and it seems maybe apparent that there was a type of zodiac before the zodiac that we know about today with astrology that was more a pure thing that they used to keep track of the seasons. And then it got corrupted and ended up being all of the stuff with Roman gods and things. Next slide, or pagan gods. But this is just some interesting looking mosaics that these were built in modern times. This is not ancient, but ancient technology. Next. Not quite the Tivoli fountain in Rome, but the closest thing to it. Next. Just walking around Jaffa, the old city. It's high on the hill. There's a port over there. Next. I found doors fascinating. There's just so much variety in doors. Next. And windows. So now you see these ugly metal doors where the shopkeepers close it up and lock it up tight at night so nobody steals it. Next. Interesting looking door. Some of the plants you see next are the same plants you'll see right here in Texas. Look at this junky looking building on the bottom with storefronts, and look up top. Nice looking apartment or house. Next. Look at how junky this town is really junky in many places. And see the dust on that car again. They haven't driven their car probably in about a week because it's still covered. Next. Keep going. Next. Just typical scenes. You see, this is where I stayed at the Abraham Tel Aviv. Next slide. Oh, this is where I was when we had the missile strike. This intrepid professor from Brussels, he teaches in Brussels. He lives in the Netherlands. He's a modern history professor, and he visits war zones on purpose to be able to experience the wars as they're happening and to get a first-person, close-hand view of what's going on as opposed to something filtered through history or the media. He wants to see it firsthand. He left, I think, the day right before the missile strike, so he missed the excitement. But a real brave guy. He's gone to places like Ukraine during the war, and he wants to go to Kashmir, which is really a dangerous place. Next slide. So I met him at the hotel. We met a lot of tourists. People were very friendly, and we got to know each other really well during that time. This is the, next slide, this is the Grand Mosque in Tel Aviv. It's a big, not a mosque, I'm sorry, synagogue. Next. So I walked on the Shabbat. I went up there trying to find some Shabbat service going on or Sabbath service. And next slide, I walked inside, and everything was in Hebrew, and I wasn't getting much out of it, so I tried to find another one. Keep going. I think that's Wisteria or something like that. Next. That was a beautiful place. See, you have some really nice places, and then you got some really junky places. Next slide. I think that's, what's that, jasmine? Is it jasmine or something like that? It had a nice smell to it. Next slide. Bougainvillea. Those from Pasadena, remember what that's all about. Next slide. Has thorns on it. Next. And next. Next. Some of the same flowers you see here. This is Dizengoff Square. And this is the epicenter of the protest about the hostages, trying to get the hostages home, and memorials to those who died or are still in captivity. All around this fountain, people have put up little shrines, you might say, to their fallen people or the people they're still missing. So a very emotionally ridden place. When you see protests about the government not getting the hostages out, this is where most of them are taking place. Next slide. More examples of that at close in. A lot of teddy bears for some reason. Next slide. People that are lost, or we don't know where they are. Next slide. Next. Next. Now we're moving on to a Samaritan house of worship. Okay, this is 6th century BCE, CE. I'm sorry. That would be the common era. And go ahead and click on that one. This one I think I took at the Eretz Israel Museum. Next slide. In Tel Aviv. And there's a whole bunch of mosaics here. These are actually the real deal. I think they moved them or reconstructed them in this particular spot. Keep going. We're going to go through. See, look how beautiful these are. This 6th century, so we're talking about 1,500 years ago. You can see the Egyptian, not the Egyptian, maybe some of that, the Greco influence in this that still exists. Next. And this was in Tel Aviv, Rothschild Center. I went into this exhibit. It's an art exhibit. Next. And this guy right here, his name is Evangelist Kairos. Light and Thread was the name of this. He's a photographer. Next slide. That's him in his glowing robe. What he took these pictures with models with actual ancient costumes that they have found and collected all over the Mediterranean, Mesopotamia, the Mediterranean, the Levant, all of this area put together. So what you're seeing here is a photograph, but superimposed on this photograph is thread, gold, leaf, all kinds of things, jewels, sequin type things on top of that. So you get this kind of a three-dimensional effect. Next slide. And some of them are just really extraordinary. Next. This is a panorama to give you kind of a clue. They had different models to all different types of costumes. But that thing on top, that was actually embroidered on top of the canvas. Right? Next slide. This was one of the more spectacular ones. It looked better, of course, in person. Next slide. Because the light would be better. But these little bells and things, those were actually, hanging on the canvas. Next. 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 I think that was. What you see a lot in the museums, you see pottery, and you see a lot of pottery. This is a typical water jug, or it could have been an oil jug, or maybe wine, right there in the middle. But notice it's pointed like a bomb going down or something. And you wonder, why do they do that? You couldn't balance it. You have to stick it in a frame, some kind of like a wooden or block situation, because it would tip over. So I was just thinking about why would they build them that way, where you can't set them. Unless you're in the sand, you can't set them down unless you got it leaning up against a corner. And my guess is that by not having a lot of base material, maybe they're lighter. Maybe they're lighter that way. Which comes into importance because a lot of the wells you had to walk down. Remember, Dave, when we were there, it was one of those wells up in northern Israel. And we think of wells out in the country as a wishing well, with a pulley and a bucket that goes down. Well, they had a few of those, but many of them were really big, and they might be 20 feet wide, just a big old hole. And you had stairways around it that you would walk and spiral down to the bottom. Take your bucket with you, stick it in the water, and fill it up. And then you have to drag it back up all these steps. Your weight and the weight of the water and the weight of this jug. And then haul it who knows how many yards or miles away to get it to where you want. Guess who did the water hauling in those days? Women. That was the woman's job. Remember the woman at the well in Samaria that Jesus met? And she was there. What time of day was she there? I think she was there, I thought it was noon. But she was not there when all the other women were there. She was ostracized. She was not one of their types, right? So she would go like in the heat of the day because the other women would go early in the morning when it made good sense because you get hot, or you go later in the evening when it begins to cool down. So imagine carrying 3 or 4 gallons of water. A gallon of water weighs over 8 pounds. How much that weighs, plus the jug, and then going up stairwells. That was a tough job, but that was a woman's job, not the man's job. Aren't you glad you're not back in those days? I heard this story once. It was, until one reaches enlightenment, every day, chop wood and haul water. So every day we should chop wood, haul water. And then once you reach enlightenment, then every day chop wood and haul water. Next slide. So wine and oil, that's what those were all about. This museum covered the land of Israel, the implements, next slide, the tools they use, hunting tools, fishing tools, next, the net, the spears, woodworking, how they would cut the sheaves and things, next. Very ingenious what they used. You use what you have. This example at the Eretz Israel, Eretz means land of, in Israel, all these little booths show different kinds of craftsmen and what their working conditions were like and their utensils. Next slide. So it's everything from, shoemaking to making bread and pottery, etc. Next. That's a pottery. You can tell from the wheel there. Next slide. And that is, I think, an olive press or grinding something. Maybe grinding grain. Next slide. I'm not exactly sure. Ethnography and folklore pavilion. Next slide. That's where we were, and this is another one of those pictures that they also had in a different place of the museum. Next slide. And these costumes, the one I recognize, the second from the left is a talit. That would be a Jewish prayer cloth. You can tell it has the design and also has the tzitzits that come off the corners. Remember the woman that reached out and touched the corners of the wings of his garment, of Yeshua's cloak? That's what we're talking about, those tzitzits, the tassels that came off the bottom. And she was healed, and he said, who touched me? That's what that was all about. Next slide. This is go to the next slide and then come back. Next slide this tells you about it. It's from a synagogue in Italy, and they brought the whole thing over. That building on the left, that structure, houses the Torah scrolls. This is a Baroque style. So this was about, I think it says 1600s, something like that. No, that's a few hundred years ago. Now let's go back one. And this is what it looks like. That's that Torah holder that they brought over and these other instruments. And then they built the rest of that to resemble what the mosque looked like when it was in Italy. So this is I keep saying mosque, synagogue, pardon me. And, with the Jewish synagogues, the men, I think, would sit on the left and the women would sit on the right. They never sat together. So you guys would have to, split up if you were here. Okay, next slide. In the same museum, they covered mail. How did you get mail around in Israel back in the day? Well, they had biplanes. They had seaplanes. They had blimps. You can see the blimps up there. They had all kinds of ways of moving mail around. Next slide. What a post box would have looked like in those days. Next slide. This is probably like in the early 1900s, about 100 years ago, I would say. That camera at the bottom middle, that was a Pentax. That's what I took my pictures in Israel with, both black and white and color. So I would send my pictures over, and then they would show up in the portfolio or the Worldwide News later on when we developed that. When Dave and Clyde and who else was there? Dave, Clyde, and Ken Traby. They put together the first Worldwide News. They started it. And Dixon did the typesetting for it. And I had 12 pictures in the first one that came out from all of these things that I'd done. Okay, next slide. But that's the kind of camera I use. And now I use a digital. I use my phone. Pottery, you see lots of pottery. Next slide. And then some abstract art. Next. Pottery everywhere. Now, in this example right here, we see a couple of different things going on. Back in the back here are your fertility gods. They were big into that, the pagans. And you have oil lamps. Typically, notice this particular oil lamp is more of a fancy one. It's made out of clay. The wick would go here, and you would pour the olive oil in here, and put a cork or wooden stopper on top so it wouldn't evaporate. And walk around with this in your house if you wanted to. Now the next slide will show a different design. But go back for a second. You can see how they made it. They found the actual mold. See that? That's the mold that they would make these things out of. So they would press the clay into the mold that's their version of factory automation, you might say. Assembly line process. Make it easier just by making a mold. And then they would make it in two parts, and I think you'll see that on the next page. Here's another mold down here. I think that's a mold. Next slide. And then what they would do is do the top and then do the bottom and then put them together, which is very commonly used today. If you got a big piece, you don't do it all as one huge piece. You do it in pieces, and then you smooth it in to where they blend together. Now, these cheaper, even today when you buy them at the souvenir stores, these are the cheaper ones where you use one piece, and then you just dimple it or pinch it. And that's where you put your wick, and then you just pour your oil right here and walk carefully, don't slosh it too much. Oil lamps all over. We found, find any oil lamps, Dave? We found all kinds of broken pottery. we didn't find much of anything in our thing, except I found 2 people one day, but that's another story. Next slide. I went on a, Rosalie, this was the trip to Ain Karim. You used to live there, right? Rosalie is from, where do you live? Lufkin, that's what I thought, yeah. Mm-hmm. That's it. A beautiful day. We had clouds that day. Yeah, this is Ain Karim, the bridge going kind of south along that main road. Next slide. Beautiful day. This, I think, is the birthplace, supposedly, of John the Baptist.
That's where they hid him.
That's where they hid him?
If anybody ever thought about it, what happened to John? He was under 2 years old, too, whenever that tree went out and killed all the baby boys. And so they have a beautiful mosaic in there. I don't know if you got to.
I didn't get to see it. It was closed. Got there too late. It was.
Did you walk up there? Or did you
No, I couldn't even get in. This is putting my camera through the gate.
Yeah, but in order to get there, you had to walk up, huh?
Yes. Yeah, you walk up a few stairs.
A few? Okay.
I don't remember being any hill for a stepper, but
Well, this was a steep hill that you either drove or you.
yeah, it is. Everything's steep around there. Everything is steep.
Yeah, but they have like a
Next slide.
mosaic area there, where behind this mosaic wall,
Mm.
supposedly where Elizabeth and John were hidden.
Okay. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. We're just about time for a break here, and that's why I couldn't get in, because of that. Keep going. Gates kept me out, and then we're going to stop. One or two more. This is the Mary's Well, or Spring of Mary, and water still runs to this very day. And next slide. So I went around this hill up there. Isn't that gorgeous? It's just a beautiful day. Very rugged. This is why they call it the hill country, for a reason. Next slide.
Over to the left, is that where Hadassah Hospital was?
Yeah.
Left, that last
There was something, a monastery or something there. This is looking down on Mary's Well, that minaret-looking thing. Next slide. That's not minaret. That's Catholic, I believe. And that's part of it. Okay, next slide. We're going to finish Ain Karim. And this is the group that came into Tel Aviv a couple of days later, and actually the next day. So we'll stop right there. It's now time to take a break, and we'll come back and resume this during the sermon portion today as well. Okay? Let's end with a prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you that you've given us these opportunities to visit your land, to learn about it, to learn about your people, your land, and your promise and your destiny for the people of Israel and your church. We thank you so much that we're here, and help us to be in your will and to follow you towards the kingdom of God. In the name of Yeshua we pray. Amen.